Tuesday. It's Tuesday again, and this is Dr. Kenya.
Dr. Deanne, and our
And
guest.
we have our special invited guest, Dr. Danielle Smith again. Some of you may have seen her late last year. She's back. And we are going to jump into the topic of KPIs for organizations going through customer-driven digital transformations. Now, two topics that have come up are the fact that a lot of organizations are going through digital transformations, and that's the perfect time to consider how customer driven or customer focused your organization is so that you can weave those two in together. And so we thought it made sense for us to come together and have this conversation around KPIs to consider, why, which ones, that sort of thing. And so if you have questions, throw them out, but we'll jump right in. So what's going on, ladies? What have you seen in terms of the value of customer-driven or KPIs focused on those customer-driven transformations?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure. I'll go, Danielle. I know we're not used to having three people on here, but I think the big change, and from what I've seen, is KPIs, customer-driven KPIs, have always been important, whether we've done it or not. But I do think as we're moving with some of these innovative technologies like AI, machine learning, you get kind of trapped in the engineering focus, and it's very easy to lose focus of the customer aspect of it. So I think the timing's great for the topic that yes, we're grabbing these new technologies that in some ways feel like the humans being removed. It's new, exciting technology, but let's not forget that, the human aspect of it. So anyhow, Danielle, I don't know if you have anything, but that's exactly why I think the topic's so critical right now, really. We do end up forgetting the human and focusing on the actual technology.
Yeah, and I apologize because my network is pretty choppy today. So if I'm redundant or if I'm snapping and popping, apologies. But I completely agree. Like when it comes down to digital transformation, a lot of the focus is on the technology, but also on cost savings and internal operations.
Yeah.
And we sort of lose sight of taking that step back and saying why we're doing this in the first place. It's always to deliver a better XYZ to the market, to your stakeholders. And so I completely agree that when you're in the middle of a transformation like this, it's a great time to revisit those KPIs because, like everything, those also need maintenance and revisiting and iteration. So I'm happy to talk about one of my favorite things today.
So when we talk about those KPIs, let's jump into one or more of them. So give me what you think is one of the most important KPIs to consider. Deanne, what do you think is one of the KPIs that need to be a priority for your engineering team more than any?
Well, this is my opinion. That's a hard question actually, because there are many that I consider equally important, but I think you have to have the KPIs that are directly related to what the customer experience is. For instance, I was on the team, HFers, marketing, your UXers, marketing people, product people, always had to worry about NPS scores, for instance. One thing we did was to, whereas the developers were worried about how many bugs, do we take care of? How many lines of code do we write? Yeah, that sort of thing. We actually introduced, now you're going to be responsible as well. Or accountable as well for those NPS scores. And I'm just giving that as an example, as a direct reflection of customer satisfaction or engagement with your product. So the development teams also had, goals around those NPS scores. It made them much more aware of their customers' experience. It made them much more engaged with that, and kind of even the work the UXers were doing, they were a little more focused because that was reflecting a lot of things that impact that NPS score. And
Absolutely.
we still have.
Absolutely. So when we have Jim Cruz on the line. Hey, Jim.
Oh, yes, Jim.
Nice to see you. So when we think about these KPIs, like we said, the interesting part is that we have to consider the fact that there's a caveat around which KPIs are most relevant, highest priority in terms of baking into what the team strives for in terms of goals. And like you said, NPS is a really good marker. We have our, thoughts on the pros and cons of NPS,
Right.
but the point is that it is now a benchmark to have your team or hold your team accountable to looking at more than just, defect rates, bugs, lines of code, that sort of thing. And it also gives them an incentive to stay focused on the output. Is it effective? Is it useful and usable?
Yes. Yes. And then there are other things. I don't know if Danielle, I know we can't see you, Danielle, but I think I heard her. Okay. Maybe not. So for people who don't know, Danielle lives in Mexico. I have that right, Kenya. So
Yeah.
Right now, poor thing's going through up and down with network issues. So, but yes, Kenya, I agree. It's a different topic. Any pros, cons. We can do a whole session on NPS scores, but that sort of thing is important. Even having where development, another thing is having them, part of their KPIs are actual direct engagement with customers. We did that as well. Every single one of our developers had to go on either be directly involved in sitting in on usability tests, or they had to do a follow me home. Found a lot of success for that because, as we know, it's a totally different experience when you're sitting in front of a customer and hearing those pains versus hearing me tell you about those pains. So all of those things just kind of brought forward, even when, and I see Jim is on here, even when they were looking at machine learning and AI and incorporating it, it still kept them focused on that human component because they were doing those kind of things, going on the, site visits, at least one, attending those usability sessions, that sort of thing. And now we have Danielle back.
In a new location in the house, closer to the router. So
what are your thoughts, Danielle?
So I'm sorry if this is redundant because I couldn't hear a lot. But when you talk about NPS as an important metric for transformation, one of the things that I found is super helpful is to use machine learning, to partner with your data scientists and use machine learning to categorize every one of those comments that you get. So when you field an NPS survey or a kind of point in time, those kind of pop-ups in your face, like, how do you like this website? There's that open-ended text box. And it's very important to read every single one of those comments, especially when you implement a new technology, a change to the experience, because people will tell you what is wrong. They'll tell you what's right, but usually what's right is like, oh, this is great. And it's not a lot of meat there, but the what's wrong is where the gold is. And when you share those verbatim comments with the team, it brings you closer to the user and helps to inform your roadmap in a way that is data-driven and customer-centric. And if you don't have, like I said, if you don't have the bandwidth to read every single one of those comments, you kind of have to in the beginning to help train an algorithm. But then you can use an algorithm to group those comments and route them to the correct product teams.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that's a really good point. I think looking at all the other opportunities outside of just the KPIs themselves, there's a lot of creativity and innovation that can come into play. And that's another KPI to hold your teams accountable to, is being more innovative. And maybe it's coming up with more novel ways to apply machine learning internally, or maybe it's about looking for patent opportunities within the work that you do based on that customer-driven transformation and the insights coming out of that. One of the other examples we had was looking at teams like support or other customer facing internal teams that might have opportunities to transform the way they do their jobs. And now their time to resolution may come down significantly.
Yep.
There's another KPI to track.
Yes. Yeah.
That one scares the shit out of me. I mean, hi. So time to resolution is a tricky KPI. And that's why I think about these as categories of KPIs, because you might have time to resolution, but you need a companion one to see how people feel about, is their problem resolved? Because what we'll see if you only focus on time to resolution, you'll brush people off the phone, and because the reward structures aren't aligned to what we are trying to do. And so with machine learning and AI tools, you do have the capability to more intelligently route calls to the right person, or to interrupt that agent or that customer service representative to say, hold up, you're going too fast. This person is, I mean, if you, depending on how sophisticated your algorithms are, of course, this person might be, needs more help than you are providing.
I think we need an applause for that one. That is so important. And I just have to say that, yes, we do definitely have to think about the aspect of, did you actually solve their problem, and was it a good experience?
Yeah.
So you get a hands up for that one, Danielle.
Yeah.
It's making up for my network problems.
And then how do you, I was just going to say, so that's real interesting, you know, from that support perspective. And then when you think about from that development perspective in KPIs, resolutions become a little different, right? How do you solve these problems? So, you know, I know that can be a tough one in terms of KPIs for innovation. You know, what do you say? You need 2 innovative ideas a year for those KPIs. So it's always interesting, you know, talking about how do you encourage that through, you know, KPIs. Jim's got a good question, but you know, what are some of the things you've seen there? Even if it's, you know, we've seen where it was kind of required, you're going to some kind of hackathon, or your organization is hosting those hackathons. You know, let's come up with some innovative and you know, one KPI might be, you know, you're having these things or ideas coming out of them. And then maybe upstream, you know, at the executive level, they have KPIs. They've got to take something. I don't know, you know, remember when we were in house, Kenya, and it was like, that was a KPI for the executives. It's like, you have to take some of these innovative ideas coming out of, for instance, a hackathon, and you have to do something with them. So, you know, that's something that kind of holds we see there's a problem, or we want to have innovative solutions to customer needs. Now, what do we do? And how do we just not have a hackathon and give out trophies? How do we take that to the next
and apply
step?
them? Yeah. So Jim has a question. His question is, what do you think of tackling these kinds of transformations incrementally versus in bigger chunks of functionality? And what does that mean to, or the implications on KPIs?
It is so hard. I'm going to jump in because I've participated in these incremental transformations and like huge, like very painful, sudden transformations. So incremental transformations are less painful because people see it as achievable. But what happens, what I've seen is that because an organization is in a group of individuals and a group of teams, those teams don't have similar KPIs. So if the product team and the engineering team is going through an agile transformation, you know, let's pretend like it was 10 years ago. They're going through an agile transformation, but the business partners are not. It's a train wreck. Yeah. So we have to, I do believe in incremental transformations. I do believe that those are more reasonable for humans to do, but we have to have a middle ground between that big, kind of cut I don't know the right analogy, but the big light switch transformation. Versus the baby step transformation.
The baby step. And Jim caveated that question, if I understand correctly, when you think about it from a UX perspective, so those bigger chunks of functionality might be a particular feature within the application, so that instead of flipping the switch, you're going feature by feature or function by function within the application. And then you've got a jarring experience for the customer because it's discrepant.
Yes.
You know, what does that mean in terms of KPI?
Oh, Jim, I love you.
Jim, you've got a fan.
Yep.
Again, I'm sorry. Did you want to?
Experience this? I mean, we've experienced where you flip everything at once on for on the existing customer in particularly. It is a very jarring experience for some. So he did a smiley face. I know Danielle can't see the comments, but that is jarring. But Danielle, I know you were saying something, but we've done that in different ways of introducing that technology and that change, and I think that becomes part of the effort. Really, is looking at how do you introduce these significant changes that introduce a new way of working for your customer.
Yeah, and one way I've done it in the past is to look at have the KPI of first, because KPIs are work. They aren't just magic. They don't just happen. But first we define what the key flows are, like the top 5 flows, and then the top 10, and then the rest of the flows. And usually that's by a combination of UX research and analytics of saying like what's most important to the customer and what do we see them doing actually. And so when we do the transformation, we focus on these top 5 or top 3 first, and then our KPI for the year is to try to get to 85% or 98%, or some manageable rollout, so that you might have a consistent experience for, let's say, your payment flow, but when you go in to update your address, it's like a haunted house. But we try to ameliorate that as fast as we can.
And then when you think about that, what would that mean to CSAT, customer satisfaction KPIs, and how would you handle baking those in, giving the consideration to the fact that you're trying to do this incremental transformation?
So that's why I feel like the comments are so important, because if you were to segment the CSAT is one number, it is what it is. But when you want to see what's driving that movement, you have to look at the comments. And if your comments are coming from a deprioritized flow, then maybe you were wrong and you need to revisit that KPI of like where you go next, or put a Band-Aid in that flow to make it a little bit healthier.
Yeah. Dan, did you have a perspective on this?
I'm sorry, I'm looking at Jim's comments. He's got some good ones over there. I think even when you are introducing these changes, whether it's, I'm definitely an incremental fan if it's something significant you're doing, but even then, I think part of keeping, when you think about NPS, when you think of the satisfaction ratings, it's going to make you think of other things as you're introducing it. And so Jim, it's right, that big bang can be jarring, but so can little changes if it's in a key area of your application. So I think when you keep your eye on those customer-centric KPIs, it's going to make you think of also how do you introduce that change. So are you suddenly, okay, let's give a little more focus on those, where they walk me through is holding their hand through it. When they come to those changes, making that assistance really easy to get to. If it's more of the true innovative work where there's more AI, that's a great way of getting feedback as well. Have you done it in the right way? Because the purpose should be a seamless, integration that's making their life in the background kind of easier, taking those repetitive tasks away, whatever it may be. But in the end, whether it's incremental or big, if you're looking at those customer sat KPIs, it's going to make you look at how do you soften that jarring experience, whether it's a small change or a really big change. But I do agree with your last comment as well, Jim. The UI is one thing, kind of that functionality is a different ball game. So, with the UI, you can make those little incremental changes, but there's some there's some functionality that's such a departure when you get into innovative ways of doing things. It is going to be a change, and there's no kind of soft way of doing it for some really innovative functions. So I do think you do have to start thinking about other things as you're introducing these changes, however you're introducing them.
Yeah, one common thread that I've heard across the conversation is the fact that now you, as a team, as an organization, I should say, or big T team, are now more focused on the customer in that transformation. And it's less about just the internal inner workings and how those are changing. Now you've got teams, small t, or different functions within your organization that are now working together more closely or in a different way, which means that KPIs around collaboration, cross-functional collaboration, and the ability to look at how do I give and get information from different teams, that starts to become a priority as well.
Yes. Yeah, that cross collaboration.
Yeah. So we have a question from Samantha. Hey there, Samantha. How can you account for CSAT numbers when usually people fill that in when finishing something? What about people who stopped and dropped off?
So I think this goes into triangulation of data, right? So the CSAT is not the end all be all. You should be getting data, including stop and drop. That's part of your data that hey, 90% of our people stopped and dropped. So that's an indication too, right? Look at the data. Where are they stopping and dropping? You need to do some more research. And Danielle, I know you had something to say.
Yeah, sorry, my face is so. I'll get better at this.
You're doing
so
great.
There's a couple of things that I've seen. I definitely agree what Deanne mentioned is like you have to look at the data to see where people are dropping off. If you're using a tool to do your kind of post-task CSAT survey and you're seeing a lot of people drop off, go ahead and serve up a survey around that time to a random sample of people and see what's happening there. And there's also something else that I've thought about a lot is like, when we look at only analytics or only customer satisfaction, we're missing the whole picture. And so when you look at only analytics, you can only see what we allow people to do. And if a lot of people are dropping off, we may be missing a picture of like, they were here to do something completely different, and it's just not afforded by the application. So having some sort of qualitative research that just asks folks, what do you want to do, is super important so that you're able to pair that with the CSAT metric, because in that case, the CSAT is not giving you an accurate measure. And when you add more functionality to the application, your CSAT is going to change, and you have no real reason why other than you just gave people more features. So that's a great question. And that is something that is, you have to balance the annoyance of those pop-up surveys with post-task surveys. But I'm a fan of the self-select feedback. Like I get to a point I can click a button and like leave feedback because I'm like, oh, I can't find what I need. That's also another version. You don't want to use that number as part of your calculation, but those comments are very valuable.
And she's right. Samantha made the comment, quant plus qual. Absolutely.
Yes.
I mean, I don't think you can.
Guess what? You get.
Samantha, applause.
You get applause. Thank you for that one, Samantha.
Yeah, I mean, I think Kenya and I talked about this it might have been last week before.
About being asked by
clients, are you quant? Are you qual? It's like, no.
That's it. And you know what I love? The statement that you make, Samantha, the easiest numbers to measure do not equal the best to share. That should be on a t-shirt. The easiest numbers to measure are not the best ones to share. And to the point you both made earlier, sometimes you have to triangulate, or in most cases, you have to triangulate that data before you share it out to tell the story, because it really doesn't tell a story by itself.
Yes, and a good one in that on that line is as we were talking about innovation. One of the metrics or KPIs I kind of put in place for the team is just like the number of experiments you run. So the number of A/B tests that you launch.
I like that.
It's not really a good measure of innovation. It's a measure of process. And until we get that process muscle down, then we'll come up with better measures of innovation, and we'll have like those numbers that we share.
Yeah.
But individually for the team, I'm like, oh, we only ran one this month. Like, what's going on? And sometimes it can be staffing, sometimes it's tooling, but it's things that we need to know about process. But it's not something I would share with the CEO. It's not it's not that kind of KPI.
I mean, it's like you're tinkering in the lab. You're trying to figure out the right formula, and so you're trying out different things. Same thing that you would do in a chemistry lab. You're not going to share everything up that you're just doing, but what you discover is what you share.
Yes. Yeah. And that's her next, I think, Samantha, you got a lot of good stuff here is, around how do you share that up? If that, and again, we go back, those CSAT numbers, they may be fine. And that's what you're sharing up. And the executives think we're good to go. And we're not really, and I think that's a whole topic we could cover, Samantha. But I think it goes back to telling the story and the triangulation of that data. And that's what you're communicating up, and not, hey, look, here's our SAT, here's our ease of use, and we've all seen that. You go in a meeting and you just have pretty charts saying, look, we're at, here's our SAT score, here's our ease of use, here's our number of errors. And it may show, oh, we're good, and you're not, or you're stagnant, or, whatever it may be.
Yeah. And I think one of the important things when you share numbers like that is to share them in context of a question. Like the question is, are customers happy to use our product, or something like that? Are we meeting customers' expectations? And then you have the CSAT number, but we also have these qualitative comments that share X, Y, and Z. We also have a lot of complaints about the AI being wrong. So we have multiple triangulations of data, qualitative and quantitative, under this one question that we are trying to monitor and answer as an organization.
Yeah. And as I listen to the two of you, what I recognize is as you talk about that reporting up and the information or data that's being gathered from the bottom, what I see is an opportunity to craft KPIs that define those activities or goals around those activities.
Yes.
And as you see things change for better or for worse, you now have opportunities to look at moving the goalpost around that benchmark. And now setting KPIs for the teams that help them to understand what getting better looks like from that customer data perspective. Yeah,
most definitely. Yes. The worst thing I know that a lot of people do this, but try not to do this. To ask people what are the metrics, and then you pick from the metrics.
Right.
Don't do that. Pick from your goals. Where are we trying to go as an organization, and then define the metrics. And they may not exist. You might have to build them, but don't start from a menu of KPIs. Start from your goals.
I love it. You got to start with real, valuable, relevant numbers, and not just, you're not picking numbers or KPIs out of a hat. Any final thoughts on this topic before we wrap?
No, I think we covered it. It's a great topic. Yes. It's good timing.
Absolutely. Yes, thank you so much for your questions. Dr. Danielle, thank you for joining us today. We will see you again soon from sunny Mexico. And thank you so much for listening in today. You know where to find us, info@leangeeks.net. Have a great day, and we will see you next week.
Yes.
Bye.